Hello. David Petraeus, nice to see you. Hi. David Petraeus, nice to see you too. So what is this here?
Navy's highest civilian one.
Wonderful.
Was a retired Navy civilian. 32.
Wow. Moved all over?
Mostly here in Monterey at the Fleet Numerical Meteorology and Oceanography Center, which is the Navy's Weather and Ocean Prediction Center. I retired there in 2011. Technical and Scientific Director, pretty much all the operations, military operations in the world, we supported them with weather and ocean stuff.
That's a small world.
Yes.
So let's see, I guess we'll just sit here and Secretary Panetta wanted to. Oh, okay. Well, huddle.
Hey there, how are you? All right, your questions.
If China invades Taiwan, should we go to war with China? And if so, what would that war look like, and can we win it?
David?
This is, you know, the reason I always love being alongside Secretary Gates and Secretary Panetta is that a former soldier can say that's a policy issue and defer that to them. So I'll be happy to have Secretary Gates take the first crack at this.
I think that, well, Bob, come over here, because I think they recorded you.
I think first of all, it depends on how it starts. If Taiwan declares independence and goes off the rails, if you will, and violates all of the agreements that have been made since 1972, then I think the United States will have to think long and hard about what it does in response. On the other hand, if there is no such provocation on the part of Taiwan, and without any provocation, China were to invade Taiwan, I think it really, I think it is important that the president and our government maintain the policy of strategic ambiguity that we've had since that time, to leave the Chinese wondering what we would do. So I guess the way I would answer your question is, we need to take the steps necessary so that that decision doesn't come. That we put enough weapons and enough training into Taiwan that China is not tempted to invade Taiwan in the first place. So I think deterrence has to be the primary focus of what we do now, so that a future president doesn't face that challenge.
I'll take the second part of the question, which is, what would a war like that look like? It would be maritime. It would be in the air. There would be a significant cyber component to it. And we don't have to imagine too hard what it would look like, because China has recently shown us their battle plane. After Speaker Pelosi's visit, and again after the meeting between Speaker McCarthy and Madam Tsai, the president of Taiwan, China effectively showed us it'll be a blockade, it'll be long-range cruise missiles, it'll be cyber, it will be a significant air-sea battle. Eventually, if the Chinese were to get ashore in Taiwan, then you'd have the land war begin. But it will start at sea, almost certainly, and in the air.
Go ahead.
Putin has been rattling the nuclear saber ever since he invaded Ukraine. And recently announced he was going to station tactical nukes in Belarus. What's the likelihood that Putin would actually use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine? And if so, how should the U.S. and NATO respond?
David?
First of all, I don't think that the positioning or deployment of nuclear weapons to Belarus makes any real difference. It's a short distance from Russia. That doesn't, again, change the calculations, I don't think, in any way. Beyond that, I would observe that the rattling of the nuclear saber that Putin has done from time to time is often a sign of desperation at a particular critical juncture in the war in Ukraine, where he hasn't achieved his objectives. He's lost the Battle of Kyiv or Kharkiv or the other different locations, Kherson and so forth. He has not achieved his objectives. He's trying to drive a wedge between members of NATO, between Europe and the United States, North America, trying to unsettle the coalition that has really been so steadfast and extraordinarily supportive of Ukraine, and perhaps even unsettle the Ukrainians. The fact is, though, that I think that the response by Western leaders, helped by a response by President Xi of China and also Prime Minister Modi of India, has largely dissuaded Putin from considering this seriously, because they pointed out that he would be in a worse place if he uses tactical nuclear weapons than he would be if he did not use them. The U.S. National Security Advisor, for example, said that if Russia were to use nuclear weapons, there would have to be catastrophic consequences, his words. That's significant. And then there's just the practical difficulties of what do you do with tactical nuclear weapons. Your own forces are presumably going to be in the vicinity of them. And if it turns the entire world against you at a time when some of the world, of course, is at least abstaining from voting against Russia in the UN General Assembly and elsewhere, what has that achieved? So I think that the objective analysis is that use of tactical nuclear weapons would have a tactical effect, not a strategic effect. The strategic effect actually would be that it would turn Putin into even a greater pariah internationally than he already is. And that is what has prevented him so far from any really serious considerations, never even moved them into position or anything like that to the extent of our knowledge. And I tend to think that the likelihood is still generally quite low, and that the cautions against this, again, not just by the West, not just by the US and other NATO countries, but also by President Xi and Prime Minister Modi, will keep him from using those nuclear weapons.
And maybe somebody reminded him that in the Ukraine, the winds blow from
Yes.
the west to the east.
Yeah, yeah. Please.
Other questions?
If Kim Jong-un demonstrates a credible capability to strike the U.S. with a nuclear weapon, what should we do?
If Kim Jong-un, say it again.
If Kim Jong-un demonstrates a credible capability to strike the U.S. with a nuclear weapon, what should we do?
Yeah, want to take a shot?
First, we need to recognize there's no silver bullet to dealing with Kim Jong-un. He's well named, he's unpredictable. He is also someone who is very dependent on China. So I think working here in this particular case with China needs to be part of the solution. That's complicated, it's hard, particularly given the rising tensions with China. Secondly, we need intelligence that can give us the immediate knowledge of when he is marrying up a nuclear weapon with a delivery system. We also need our intelligence to help us understand the predicate to your question, which you'll get different answers on. Whether he has the ability, and by the way, Guam is part of the United States of America, and therefore almost certainly he has the capability to strike a part of the United States today. So we need intelligence. We need to, as difficult as it will be, in my view, work with China. Number three, we need to work with our allies, partners, friends in the region. That includes, most notably in that part of the world, Japan, and of course, top of the list, South Korea. Number four, if he were to begin to move using intelligence toward marrying up a nuclear device with a capable delivery system, we would have to consider a kinetic response at that point to take that capability away from him. So there's no single answer to the question. It's really a variety of things that we have to do, and I'll close with one that we talk about defensively often, and that's cybersecurity. This is an area in which offensive cybersecurity potentially can play a role. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, just on that point, I just returned from a trip to Korea, and I think Jim's touched on all the key points, but let me stress the fact that part of the subject here is how do we develop the alliances we need in order to confront with a dangerous world. And what we're doing in Ukraine, the United States, and NATO is an example of having a strong alliance that can unify with the United States in trying to provide what is needed in order to stop tyrants in the world. In South Korea, one thing that impressed me is that alliance between South Korea and Japan and the United States is very strong. And it's had some weak points. There have been some criticism. But right now, South Korea is making a major effort to try to resolve some differences with Japan that go back to World War II. And they're being successful at it. And the ability to be able to have that alliance work together is extremely important. We have over 28,000 troops in South Korea. The United States is deeply committed to making sure that we protect South Korea and protect the Pacific. But the key to that is whether or not we can maintain a strong alliance with our partners in that part of the world. Because if we can, then I think we can be much more effective at deterring North Korea from what it's doing. You know, the bottom line is, you know what the biggest deterrence to North Korea is? If they try to do anything, they will lose their regime, period. And that's a message we have to keep sending. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
What publication are you coming from? Are you from the local newspaper?
Yes, Pacific Road Press.
Gotcha.
Pacific
What's
Road.
your declaration?
Navy Science Civil
Yeah.
Retired Navy Civil.
Good for you. Thank you.
Fleet Numerical Meteorology and Oceanography.
Oh, good for you. Thank you.
Here's the Monterey Herald.
From the Monterey Herald.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for coming today and being part of our little deal. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for taking that cool picture. Thanks for your time with the department. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
How you doing? I'm good. How about yourself? Good to see you. Good to see you. Take care.